And now, without further ado, Kirby Lambert.
Okay, the first thing I'm going to do, I'll say welcome. Thank you for being here. If you've heard me talk before, you're either a glutton for punishment or maybe you just really like the breakfast. I don't know, but either way, you're to be commended for being up and here this early in the morning. I'm going to see if we can turn the lights down a little bit. This is a very visual presentation, so if you can't see the screen well, I encourage you to move your chair and come up here and look, because these are photos that you definitely are going to want to see. So my recent history conference presentations have focused on numbers, and with today's topic of 101 places, sticking to that vein seemed like a logical thing to do. But I also knew that giving one talk on 101 places wasn't feasible. So after much deliberation, I decided to keep it simple and focus on the number 6. Specifically, I'm talking about 5 W's and an H. I think everyone is familiar with this, the 5 W's, who, what, when, where, and why, and H for how, although really I think H is for history, because everything has a history, and that's generally the most interesting part. This is true even for these 6 letters. According to an article by Michael Sloan published in the University of Chicago Press Journals, the 5 W's are rooted in 7 questions used in ancient Greece to communicate stories clearly. Sloan maintains that Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics was the original locus for the Septem Circumstantiae, but that is way too deep of a rabbit hole for this early in the morning. So instead, let's give credit to Englishman Thomas Wilson, who penned this ditty in the 16th century. He clearly has the idea down, even if whose and disclose don't really rhyme that well. Can everybody read that okay? Do I need to read it? Okay. 350 years later, Rudyard Kipling reiterated the same idea, but with new and who, he was much better at crafting rhymes. I can. So, I keep 6 honest serving men. They taught me all I knew. Their names are what and why and when and how and where and who. That's Rudyard Kipling, The Elephant's Child, 1902. The first one is who, what, and where, by what help, and by whose. Why, how, and when do many things disclose. And that's Thomas Wilson, The Art of Rhetoric, 1560. So by the early 20th century, journalists were taught that the lead to any story should answer these same questions. And by the middle of the century, 5 W's and an H had become a common teaching tool in classrooms across the country. So using this tried and true method, let's get back on track and start with what. Those of us lucky enough to live in or even visit the Treasure State have been gifted with a special place distinguished by its dramatic physical beauty and oftentimes harsh environment. Additionally, Montana's history, occurrences of the past, both extraordinary and routine, give special meaning to this place. The what we're looking at this morning is the newest publication from the Montana Historical Society Press, which explores just a few of these sites from our shared past. This new volume is a sequel to an earlier Society publication, A History of Montana in 101 Objects. That book's popularity led to this new book, which is hot off the press, having just been released last month. And I'm happy to say that the initial response has been very positive. As proof of that, I thought I'd share with you some of what the critics are saying. This is the book that I had hoped Lewis and Clark would write describing their travels in the West. Thomas Jefferson. I tried to point that out, but they're men, they wouldn't listen. Sacagawea. It's a mystery to me how anyone could ever write a book this good. I hope it never disappears. Thomas Francis Meagher. Here's a book I really can vote for. Jeanette Rankin. I'll never admit that I said so, but this book was written by the 4 smartest people who ever worked at the Montana Historical Society. That's Molly Krukenberg, director, and her dog, Callie. And I think Callie has a slightly different opinion. And Jeff Bartos, director, editor of the press. I just wish that all of our books could be this good. So, no. Even though I'm a little embarrassed to be blowing our own horns this way, just remember, they are the ones who said it. It's not like I just made those quotes up or something. So moving on to our second question using the 5 W's rubric, who? Just who's behind this book that has already received such high praise? The answer is many people, but to start with, there are 4 authors and 1 photographer. The first round of kudos definitely need to go to photographer Tom Ferris, who is responsible for all but a few of the images that filled the pages of this book. Yeah, give Tom a hand. Of course, we really want you to read every word, but even if you only look at the pictures, you won't be disappointed. However, admittedly, Tom did have just a little bit of help. Next are the 4 authors. For those of you who knew Ellen Baumler, as I'm sure most of you did, this next slide is bittersweet. This photo reminds us of how much we miss Ellen, but it also brings back so many good memories of who she was and the countless contributions she made to the study of Montana's past. No one understood better the importance of place. Sadly, Ellen did not live long enough to see her last book published, but because she was Ellen, she finished her essays well ahead of schedule and had everything in good order. That same timeliness cannot necessarily be attributed to some of the rest of us. Christine Brown is an interpretive historian who coordinates the Society's National Register Sign program, as well as this very conference that we're attending. In addition to writing her share of essays, Christine spearheaded this project. She's the one that got it started and then kept it going. If any one person deserves credit for making this book happen, I think it's Christine. Martha Cole manages the Society Outreach and Education program. Martha worked hard on her own essays, but she worked even harder trying to get the rest of us to stick to the word counts and, let's see. I might have to ask Bennett how I see the rest of this. Sorry. How do you get that to? Ah, thank you. Sorry. Thank you. That was actually quite easy. She worked quite hard trying to get the rest of us to stick to the word counts and deadlines we'd agreed to, but then promptly tried to ignore. Martha also wrote the 8 introductory essays that begin each chapter of the book. These essays tie the individual sites together and provide a big picture context for the overall connections to Montana's past. State Historic Preservation Officer Pete Brown wrote an introduction that, while very personal, also sheds a collective light on why preservation of the past is so important to us as individuals and as a state. He also explains why it's appropriate for the preservation officer to be standing on top of a windmill. Associate Editor Cody Ewert expertly corrected and polished our text so that the result was a unified whole. Notably, he hung in there from the beginning to end. With our 101 Objects book, we went through 8 editors trying to wrangle 22 authors. I think it's fair to say we learned some things in that first process. Designer Luke Duran took all of our contributed elements, our essays, Tom's photos, historic photos from the photo archives, captions, etc., and crafted a beautiful publication that showcased each of these components to full advantage. Thanks in no small part to Luke, the final product is something we are all quite proud of. There are far too many people and organizations who assisted in the process to mention here, but there are three and all of these contributions we did truly appreciate. There are three that I want to mention specifically. The first of these is the staff of the Montana Historical Society, present and past. Without their ongoing vigilance over the past 160 years, safeguarding and making accessible the Society's incredible collections, researchers, writers, and publishers would not be able to do what we love to do. The second are the countless individuals and organizations from across the state who have labored and continue to labor to preserve these sites for everyone's benefit. Team Teslo and Livingston, who saved the Teslo elevator, is just one notable recent example. Third, accolades to all the writers of National Register nominations. Their importance will become more obvious in a minute, but having their nomination forms available online was especially essential during this time when the Society Library and Archives was closed. And I know it was essential, it's going to be worth the wait, but it was really a pain not having the archives and library available to us. There's also a second way that we can apply the question who, and that's who are the historic figures, who are the historic people that peopled the sites that make up these 101 places. As the title indicates, this really isn't a book about people. At the same time, it's impossible to talk about the history of a place without talking about the people who lived that history or made it happen. So you will encounter many names and faces with whom you're probably quite familiar, as well as the names and faces that you likely don't know. In addition to the examples you see here, the book includes places associated with colorful characters like Missoula Madam Mary Gleim and Bernie Dude Rancher's Big Bones and Little Bones Alderson, who, in spite of the fact that I couldn't even find a photo to show you, still left indelible marks on Montana's history and landscape. And as is always the case, anytime we talk about history, remember that so much of our past is made up of the efforts of men and women whose daily deeds went unrecorded and whose names we will never know. Next, our next question is when? Well, when is actually an easy one to answer. Roughly speaking, it's the last 350 million years or so. At least that's the age of the Madison Limestone Formation, home to Lewis and Clark Caverns. As historians, though, no matter how fascinating the geology, what we focus on is the way in which humans interacted with the site. So the book's timeline is actually a little bit shorter than this. With places like Lewis and Clark Caverns and Medicine Rock State Park, however, you can't ignore the prehistoric backstory when it is such an integral part of the overall tale. How requires a more detailed answer than when, or at least it's going to get one. Of course, there was the research and writing and editing that you'd find with any history book. In addition, there were lots of photographs that needed to be taken. If Tom was doing this talk, he could no doubt regale us with tales of long drives and unanticipated challenges. Just what do you do when your arrival in Great Falls is met not by a great Art Deco facade you were expecting, but a wall of scaffolding instead? Before any photos could be taken, though, we first had to select the places that were going to be included in the book. Given Montana's extremely rich trove of historic sites, how did we even start? We could have mimicked early railroad officials who named new sidings like Malta and Zurich by spinning a globe. And actually, I think this might have been easier. Picking the sites was in many ways the most difficult part of the whole project. Instead, as a first step, we decided to limit our choice to sites listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Established in 1966, the register is the country's official list of places deemed worthy of preservation, buildings, structures, objects, sites, and districts that serve as enduring examples of America's diverse heritage. That decision left us with a short list that wasn't very short. Montana boasts almost 1,300 listings on the register. This includes both individual sites and districts comprised of multiple contributing resources, for example, a historic neighborhood encompassing hundreds of houses, which meant that we had to narrow down our list from about 15,000 possibilities. For those of you who aren't as quick as math as I am, we were able to include only 0.67% of Montana's National Register sites. So with that in mind, what did we do? Our next move was, naturally, to break the one rule we had agreed on and include a couple of places that aren't on the register, mostly because we wanted to bring the book up to today, and the register requires that listed properties be at least 50 years old. To make our selection process slightly easier, we cheated a little bit in the way we counted. Each chapter contains one group essay that combines several related examples. For example, 4 railroad depots comprise place number 43. Even so, how did we begin to winnow down the 15,000 possibilities from the register? We wanted to represent the whole state, of course, and include as much of our history as possible. So, we worked hard to include East and West, urban and rural, native and immigrant, cat and grizz. From there, we kept or eliminated sites by thinking thematically. We wanted to include places that represent broad patterns of human occupation from ancient times to the present. We narrowed our choices to include examples of sites influenced by the industries that played crucial roles in Montana's development. We considered changes in technology that, beginning with the Industrial Revolution, so dramatically impacted the way earlier generations lived. We pondered the ways that evolving forms of transportation altered our built environment, and likewise economic shifts. Each of the sites we included fit multiple categories on our checklist. For example, Fort Peck speaks as much to technological advances that depended on electricity as it does to the desperate nation's need for work during the Great Depression. We considered architectural style, both high style and vernacular. We looked at building methods and materials, starting with the ways in which early newcomers to the state adopted long-held building methods to the materials they found here, from logs and mud to locally quarried stone and brick, both manufactured in-state and imported. After the completion of the Treasure State's first transcontinental railroad in 1883, Montanans with enough money had access to the same building materials and same architects as people living anywhere in the country. This included such things as Carrara glass and neon, glazed terracotta, and cast iron facades. We also wanted to include distinctive cultural traditions and religious traditions that immigrants brought with them from the old world. Montana is, of course, full of more scenic places than anyone can count, so by default, many of the places that we chose are picturesque, but no place was chosen for the beauty of its surroundings alone. And given the state's plethora of majestic settings and majestic structures, some of our selected sites might at first glance leave you wondering why. Believe me, these decisions weren't always easy. Ultimately, the history behind the places we chose had to contribute to the overall story we wanted the book to tell. But did we fight in the process? Only a little. Actually, I wouldn't say we fought, but we did disagree. In the end, I think everyone who knows Montana is going to find a favorite place missing from the book. And that's true not only for the readers, but for the authors as well. In my case, I really wanted to include Great Falls High School. It's an amazing building, but that's a disagreement that I lost. If you ever get a chance to go inside, be sure and do so. I think Ellen's biggest disappointment was probably St. Ignatius Mission. Christine fought hard for the Fort Peck Theater, and Martha's still a little sad about the Twin Bridges Orphanage didn't make the cut. One place we're all extremely saddened by was the Graves Hotel, which burned after we were all set to include it. Its loss was a major blow to Harlow and a reminder to us all that we need to be vigilant in preserving what we can when we can. Which leads us to the question of why. Why are places so important? Why do we care about these remainders of our past? Place has always been one of the primary ways in which people have defined the world and their part in it. For most of us, it's a central element of our self-identity, and it informs the way we relate to others. When we travel or join a new group, and meet someone new, one of our first questions is almost always, where are you from? Even the name tags that we're wearing this morning have this information on them to help fellow conference goers more readily relate to us. But exactly what do we mean by place? As geographers use the term, place refers to a space with a unique set of physical and human characteristics. It's natural and built environments that give a location its identity and meaning. And ultimately, it's this meaning, the emotional connection that we have with certain places that make them significant and enable our surroundings to help shape who we are. A place can be of almost any geographic size, as small as a log cabin or as big as the entire Big Sky. Once my wife, Becca, who worked in the photo archives at the Historical Society, was helping a couple do photo research. The man had spent most of his youth at Lake Hotel in Yellowstone National Park, where his father had served as winter keeper. And the wife, in their conversations, it was clear the wife knew as much about Yellowstone as the man did. So when they got ready to leave, or at some point Becca made some comment about, well, aren't you just Mr. and Mrs. Yellowstone? The woman was slightly taken aback. She looked at Becca and said, oh no, he's from Yellowstone. My people are from Gardner. Historians, geographers, journalists, and novelists have all written about the power of place. Philosopher Edward Casey had this to say: "We are surrounded by places, we walk over and through them. We live in places, relating to others in them. We die in them. Nothing we do is unplaced. How could it be otherwise? How could we fail to recognize this primal fact?" Casey continues, "It is in providing outward display for things that places enable memories to become inwardly inscribed and possessed, made one with the memorial self. The visibility without becomes part of the invisibility within." Or, in Hattie Big Sky, novelist Kirby Larson states it much more simply when she wrote, "It's funny how a place can seep into your bones and become a part of you." Novelist Rebecca Solnit writes, "We often talk about our love of place, by which we mean our love for places, but seldom how the places love us back, of what they give us. They give us continuity, something to return to, and offer a familiarity that allows some portion of our lives to remain connected and coherent. It's this ability to return to a place, or to at least know that we can if we choose to, that in large part makes them so powerful." So, where are these places that mean so much to us? The short answer is, of course, Montana. But to be more specific, we're talking about a particular kind of place in Montana. What do historic places offer us that other types of places don't? I think most importantly, they provide a tangible connection to the past, something that we can reach out and touch. They provide us with visceral experiences in ways that something like reading a book simply can't. I think everyone is familiar with the concept of 6 degrees of separation, the idea that any two people on Earth are connected through a chain of no more than 6 other people. With historical places, however, there's only 1 degree of separation. That is true whether we're visiting a neighborhood where our ancestors lived or a site associated with a beloved icon from the past. We're sharing their space. There's only one degree, time, that separates us. Some Celtic spiritual traditions, among others, even have a concept of thin places where the separation is even less than a full degree. Thin places are those where the veil between the physical and the spiritual realms is perceived as particularly permeable, allowing for a heightened sense of the divine or supernatural. Historical significance is sometimes easily perceived, readily apparent at a glance. More often, though, simply looking is not enough. Most of the time, we need to know the backstory to understand the site's full meaning. Sometimes that understanding gives us cause for celebration, but not always. Our history is also replete with lamentable episodes that, like those which make us proud, provide an opportunity for us to learn from the past so that we can do better moving forward. Novelist Henry James wrote, "I like places in which things have happened, even if they're sad things." And Montana has its share of sites associated with sad things, like the Smith mine disaster that claimed 75 lives in 1943, or Man Gulch, where 13 young firefighters lost their lives in 1949. Since time immemorial, indigenous people have cherished the place we now know as Montana as a homeland worth fighting for. Across the state, now serene-looking landscapes bear silent witness to history-changing battles and treaty councils held between sovereign governments. Historic sites illustrate what daily life was like in earlier times, both the good times and the bad ones, reminding us that even though much has changed, we have more in common with people of the past than we often realize. Historic sites stand as reminders of the major events, like the Great Depression and World War II, that played defining roles in the lives of our forebears. Historic places serve as memorials to the hard physical labor endured by so many of our forebears, as well as shrines to the conspicuous wealth for the ones who benefited from that hard labor. Historic sites are masterpieces of craftsmanship, and they serve as physical testaments, statements in brick and stone to the values held by our ancestors, ideals they cherished like democracy and the importance of education, ideals which led them to erect corresponding structures that spoke to strength and permanence and their hopes for the future. The significance of place is often individual, rooted in family stories and personal memories. As singer Lyle Lovett said, "When you have a solid upbringing and a strong sense of place, that sustains you. My sense of home never leaves me." Columnist Rachel Gregory noted, "People talk all the time about influence and talk all the time about how influential the people in our lives are, and I agree, they're right. At other times, people will focus on experience, on the things that we do or on the things that happen to us. Again, those are valid points. But place is at the intersection of the people we know and the experiences we have. Place ties us together." While Gregory was talking specifically about personal history, her comments are equally valid when extrapolated to the bigger picture. Places like Virginia City and Fort Benton serve this purpose for our entire state history as well. Likewise, some places, although unique in their particulars, are more important for their commonalities they represent. It may not have looked like this, but I bet most of us can conjure up a kitchen from our past full of warm memories and delectable smells. While other places are simply unique. Unless you're from Scobie, I don't think you grew up in a place where the county courthouse began life as a brothel. Often, individual sites have meaning on multiple levels. A beloved farm that speaks equally to a family's history, the role of ethnic groups in settling the state, and homesteading as a central theme of Montana's development. Historic places can be obviously or not so obviously sacred. This includes the churches and synagogues built by immigrants who came to Montana's small towns and big cities, vast plains and rolling prairies, seeking a better life for themselves and their families. It also includes elements of the natural world still revered by indigenous people whose ancestors were the first to call this place home. As noted by nature writer Ellen Malloy, before Alaska came along and ruined everything, 1 of every 25 square miles in America was Montanan. This much space had nurtured a healthy cult of a place in which people find perfection, even divinity, in the landscape. And John Steinbeck observed, "The name of places carry a charge of the people who named them." This was especially true for indigenous peoples. Whether or not the site was sacred, American Indians incorporated places and the traditional names they gave those places into their overall worldviews in ways non-Indians generally don't. The importance of place to indigenous culture is summarized by the title of Keith Batho's book, Wisdom Sits in Places. Although Basso is writing specifically about the Western Apache who live in and around Cibecue, Arizona, I think his observations are applicable to many native cultures. That is, a community's collective history and values are often inseparable from its geography. Places are repositories of story, and the descriptive names they've been given act as a form of shorthand for historical and mythical narratives for tribal members. Recalling a specific place name instantly brings up that whole set of knowledge for tribal members who are familiar with it. When looking at the past, we often tend to think in terms of growth. We expect to find that progress that leads from nomadically inhabited homelands to small frontier settlements to modern cities. We are surprised when the opposite proves true, when bustling gold camps turn into ghost towns almost overnight, or places like St. Peter's Mission, once one of the most important communities in the region, first begin to gradually decline and then all but disappear. Perhaps most appealing of all are the many places in Montana that have not changed, settings that would still be readily recognizable to those who lived here many decades ago or even centuries ago. National Geographic photographer Sam Abel had this to say about central Montana. There are grander and more sublime landscapes. There are more compelling cultures. But what appeals to me about the central Montana is that the combination of landscape and lifestyle is the most compelling I've seen on this earth. Small mountain ranges, an open prairie, and different weather, different light, all within a 360-degree view. For Sam, it was understandably central Montana. But I'd be willing to bet that for every person here this morning has his or her own part of the treasure state that speaks to us in this way. So, to begin to wrap this up, let's review. How well did I meet the 5 W's and an H challenge? Who? The Montana Historical Society. What? Its newest book. When? From prehistoric times through the present. Where? Carefully selected Montana sites. And most importantly, why? Because historic places hold meaning and value that immensely enrich our lives. But I've only barely scratched the surface of everything that's in the book. Hopefully it's enough to make you want more. If so, then buy the book. Becca and Allie or anyone in the store will be more than happy to sell it to you. Or check it out from your local library. Thanks to a grant from the Pomeroy Foundation, the Society has been able to donate a copy to every library in the state. Either way, go to the back of the book to find the Historic Montana Places checklist to serve as your guide. Make sure your gas tank is full with some 17-cent gas. Then hit the road. Take your dog. Some of them love to read the roadside signage. Or take your cat, although they'll refuse to read road signs or anything else as long as you're watching. Or better yet, take the entire family. Put on some good tunes, turn the radio up loud, and sing along. Enjoy Montana's incredible scenery and the wildlife, but don't get too close. Take advantage of any rest stops that you come across. They can be few and far between. When you get tired, pull up a chair and sit a spell. Or better yet, spend a night or two. Gaze in wonder at a star-filled big sky after the sun goes down. Have a snack or a drink or even two, but stay out of trouble. However you want to do it, just be sure and do it. Go out and visit as many of these historic places as you can. These places that all together help make Montana the last best place.